So obviously I've heard other speakers today talking about the fact that, we were talking about your skill sets. We were talking about you needing to network, that hidden job market. One of the things that often hinders us, whether it's going for interviews, whether it's networking, whether it's once you're in a job, is actually your inner critic. And I regularly have people come to me saying, I don't feel confident enough in interviews, or I'm not going to reach out to that person. Why on earth would that senior person ever want to talk to me? And that's generally, I already can see some smiles of sort of resonating with that. That's your little inner critic, right? Having a go at that moment in time saying, you're not senior enough to talk to them. You shouldn't reach out to that person. What if they reject you? What if you fail? We also have a tendency to focus on the external. I want to change. If I change other people, or I change my job, or I change my manager, well, that's going to change my experience in life. And unfortunately, that's just not true, right? I'm going to share with you two quotes here that I absolutely love. So the first is, the biggest thing holding you back is almost always you. Start there. And that's followed up with, when you get stronger, everything in the world gets easier. Change yourself and you change everything. Now, the reason I say that is, as I said, we tend to focus on other people or external circumstances. If I can get a better job, if I can earn more money, if my boss was just a better human being, then my life will be easier. And while there's truth in that, by the way, I'm not trying to say that getting a better job or having a nicer manager doesn't have an impact. I don't have control over that. But I do have control over me. I do have control over how I think. I do have control over how I choose to think and behave. And when we think about confidence, the biggest thing holding us back from it is, sometimes it's called imposterism, sometimes it's imposter syndrome, inner critic. They're all slightly different, but for today we're going to sort of lump them into one together. But basically, this is, imposterism at its biggest is, I'm a fraud. Someday people are going to realize that I'm not as good as they think, or that I shouldn't be in this job, or that somebody else is better qualified than I am. The inner critic is a little bit more specific. Your inner critic, and I guarantee everybody here has one, some are going to be louder than others. What they say to you could be very, very different on a personal level. And it's often based on our life experiences, right? Your family circumstances, your education, what other people said to you when you were growing up. What's interesting about it is we can be really, really young. A lot of our belief systems are created by the time we're about 7. So at 7, you have certain beliefs already about yourself, about other people, about the world. And they stick with us for a really, really long time. Now, how they tend to show up, a couple of different ways. Feeling you're not good enough, right? That could be, I'm not smart enough. I'm not as far on in my life as I'm meant to be. I feel like other people are further along in their career than I am. So the good enough, by the way, could be about anything. Could be, I wasn't productive enough today. I wasn't a nice enough person today. I didn't go to the gym and I said I was going to go to the gym. Whatever your not enough is. Often a lot of this comes from comparison. And there's that old saying that comparison is the thief of joy. And it's so true. Say I'm at work today and I get a €1,000 pay rise. I'm thrilled until I find out that the person next to me got 1,250. All of a sudden, there's no joy left in mine, right? And the reason that comparison shows up so much is that we tend to hyper-focus on our shortcomings. So we do what's called comparisonitis. We look at other people around the room and we go, if only I looked like that person. If only I had that person's job. If only I lived in a house like that person. If only I had that person's partner. The problem is we only do that comparison in these little silos. So for example, if I said to you, hey, you're like, I want that person's job. And I'm like, okay, you can have it. You have to take their whole life. Not just the job. You have to take their partner. You have to take their lifestyle. You have to take everything. 9 times out of 10, you'd be like, no, not going to do it. The trade-off isn't enough. But then we move on to the next person. We go, well, they've got a better house than me. I'm like, okay, you can have their house. But to do it, again, you have to take their life. And they're like, oh, no, I'd hate their job. Or, oh, God, their partner would drive me nuts. We need to do our comparisons in a wider, because we only compare in the negative. We only find where we've got shortcomings or where we're lacking. Instead of focusing on, actually, I love their house, but my life, I actually really like my partner, or my kids are great, or my job is great. The other piece that it shows up on, and I see this quite a lot in a work environment, you have a really good idea. You're like, I'm super excited, I'm going to share this at the team meeting, and then one person rains on your parade. And they immediately go, that's not going to work. Why on earth would you think about that? And we lose all our enthusiasm, right? That's our inner critic going, I'm going to put more value on that person's opinion of my idea than I'm putting on my own opinion of my idea. And that is very much our inner critic. The last few I'll share is toxic expectations. Any perfectionists, self-identified perfectionists in the room? I see a few hands going up already. When you're a perfectionist, you think it's a defense mechanism. If I am this perfect version of myself, I won't be judged, I won't be rejected, everybody will like me. Perfectionism is unattainable. You're never, and if you're that amazing human being that everybody loves you, you are unique. Because I don't care who you are, not everybody's going to like you, not everybody's going to think your opinion is good, but how do you, those toxic expectations, by the way, that you think are motivating you, if I aim for perfection, that's what will motivate me to get up tomorrow and do a great job. If you are motivated to get up tomorrow and do a great job, you don't need toxic expectations. They're actually causing you pain because they're unattainable. So you're never going to quite get there. What we do need to know is their defense mechanism, right? All of our inner critic. Our inner critic is saying things like, you're not smart enough to apply for that job. It's trying to protect us from, that's going to be an uncomfortable situation, or, wow, I'd rather do nothing than be rejected, because we perceive not getting that job as rejection versus just a stepping stone. Now, the reason all of this happens is often people will come to me and say, I want to stop feeling like an imposter, or I want to silence my inner critic. And the problem is, that'd be like you going to your dentist and saying, I've got a toothache, please give me Panadol. I'm going to fix, the pain you're in, but we're not getting to the root cause. Because your feeling of imposterism or that inner critic, they're just the symptom. The root cause starts back up in your beliefs. Your beliefs that I'm not smart enough. Your beliefs that you're meant to look a certain way, have a certain job, whatever it might be. When we have that belief, it immediately leads to a thought, right? So maybe I have a belief that other people are smarter than me. I'm at work, team meeting happens, we're talking about a topic. My thought is, I'm not going to share my opinion here because, everybody else here is smarter than I am. Why would they want to hear my opinion? Why would I put myself out there? What if they say it's stupid? What if they don't agree with me? The problem is that thought obviously leads to the action. I'm not going to put my hand up. Now, within that, nobody in my team knows why, right? Because the inner critic is such an internal experience. All they know is I'm somebody who either doesn't have ideas or isn't willing to share them. But the results end up the same. I'm not going to get that promotion because I'm not seen as somebody who contributes. I'm not seen as somebody who has ideas or is collaborating with the team. And my results reinforce my belief. So I don't get the promotion. I go, see, I told you. Told you I wasn't smart enough. But actually, it was starting back at the beliefs again, right? If I could change my belief of, yeah, there's people on my team who know more than me in certain areas, that doesn't mean that I don't add value in something else. So, I want you to start thinking about your brain a little bit like this iceberg. About 10% of an iceberg is visible above the waterline, about 90% is hidden below the waterline. This is very much how your conscious and your subconscious mind works. I spent 20 years working in banking, and we would all pride ourselves on we're rational, we're logical, it's all numbers driven, and it's so not true, because our subconscious mind drives pretty much everything. So think of your subconscious mind like a radio. I drove up here this morning. The whole time in the background is the radio. You're not really paying attention to it, but it's having an impact and little bits of information are filtering through. If you can see the screen, I'm not sure how clear it shows at that level, your beliefs, your emotions, your feelings, your habits, your addictions, they all sit in the subconscious mind. So when we think we're making a rational decision, I'll give that example of, I see a job. I want to apply. Looks a little bit outside my comfort zone or like I don't have 99% of the skills ready to apply. I think I'm making a rational decision to not apply for that job. The reality is, somewhere down here in my subconscious, there is a conversation going on going, that's a step too far, you're not ready yet, if you apply, what will people think? Oh, you won't get the job, by the way, and that's rejection. So we need to bring more awareness here. Now, you can't bring everything in your subconscious mind up, but you can sort of slowly lower that waterline to identify what are the things maybe going on in there that are no longer serving me. They're no longer helping me in the goals that I have going forward. Maybe they protected me in the past, in my childhood or early adulthood, but they're not working for me anymore. Now, that's why we need to quieten the inner critic, right? As I said earlier, you're not going to totally get that voice to disappear. But we do, by bringing that awareness, we slowly lower the waterline and we're able to change the conversation that happens. So, the first thing is the amount of people, I've been doing the career clinics this morning, and the amount of people coming to me and saying, well, I'm not confident. And we have an incorrect assumption of what confidence is. We think confidence is somebody who just innately believes they're this amazing human being and that they can do no wrong and there's nothing that they ever fear. They never get anxious, they never get nervous, they never get stressed. True confidence comes from knowing I'm amazing, but I'm a flawed human being. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have to at times say, I don't know. Let me go figure that out. True confidence is, I trust myself that I'm going to go into a situation that I'm not 100% comfortable in, but so what? I'm not meant to be 100% comfortable. Who said I'm meant to be perfect? It's okay to answer a question with, I don't know, let me go away and find out. It's okay to make a mistake. And I always think of that picture of, or that meme of a little duck. So it's gracefully floating across the top of the water. What we don't see is underneath, it's paddling like mad, right? Its little paws, they're not paws, whatever duck's little things are going like absolute mad. So when you see other people out there, by the way, and you say, oh, I wish I was as confident as that person, I want you to realize that you're assuming confidence. You do not know that they're confident. You only see the external behavior. You have no idea what's going on in their mind. I guarantee you there's some version of an inner critic going on for them too. That old sort of saying, fake it till you make it. I don't agree with it in most contexts, but in confidence, that's what's happening for a lot of people. So we want to change our mindsets, right? We want to come out of the inner critic, or at least lessen its impact on us. So first up is, well, we have to be aware when it's showing up. And most of us, as I said, because this is a subconscious sort of conversation that's like on the radio, just on repeat, not paying any attention. So my first ask of you is, after today, like for the next week, just pay attention to what is my internal monologue. And the research shows we have anything from 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day. It's a lot of thinking, right? A lot of thinking. A lot of that is negative thinking, and it's often on repeat. So what I get up this morning and say to myself is probably what I'm going to get up tomorrow morning and say to myself, and the next day. Imagine the impact of over and over and over again, and by the way, for multiple years or decades potentially, saying something really negative about yourself. So bring awareness to it. The next step is to separate fact from fiction. So I'm going to tell you, you are all fabulous storytellers, right? Let me give you an example. I go into work tomorrow morning, my boss is grumpy. That's the only thing I know. I'm going to create an entire story around that. So within probably 2 seconds, I've decided, okay, it's me. I'm the reason. It's that report I sent yesterday. He didn't like it. And if I'm in catastrophizing mode, which, by the way, a lot of us can be, I'm going to get fired by the end of the day. Literally within 5 seconds of me walking in the door. 2 things wrong with that. One is, it is a story. I have one fact. My boss is in a bad mood. Second thing is, I'm a narcissist. I centered the entire story about me. I decided that my boss's mood couldn't possibly have anything to do with anything else going on in his world except for me. And how likely do you think that's true? Right? So if I want to separate fact from fiction, I ask. Now, I might not go over and say, hey, you seem grumpy today, but I might say, hey, seem a little off. Is everything okay? 9 times out of 10, the answer I'm going to get is something like, the girls didn't sleep last night, my boss just shouted at me, whatever. It's rarely, there's maybe 1 time out of 10 it could be about me, but at least then I find out. I know. We spend days and hours and weeks losing sleep and energy thinking about these worst case scenarios that are purely fiction. We've just created a story. So if you get to be a storyteller, and you write the story, how about you write a different, slightly more positive story, right? So the positive story is, hey, my boss is grumpy today. It's probably not about me, but hey, if I'm still a little bit worried it is, what conversation could I have to find out the actual facts? Now, the next one is I mentioned all these thoughts we have every day. You need to change the language that you use to talk to yourself. So if I was to record your inner monologue, I can guarantee you it is full of negative words like I can't, I could never, no one would ever, whatever the list is. I'm stupid, I'm this, I'm that. When we are in that subconscious frame of mind, our brain doesn't really know the difference between reality and the story we create. It believes they're all fact and the truth. So if I say to my brain, I'm stupid, that's an identity. I did something stupid. That's something I can fix, right? That's something I can learn from and do differently the next time. The other part of changing the language is we talk to ourselves the way we would never talk to another person. So if I came up to you and said, I just made a really stupid mistake and oh my God, I'm going to be fired and I'm just totally incompetent and I'm the worst employee in the world, you would immediately turn on your kindness and compassion and say, I'm sure it's not as bad as you think it is. Don't forget all the great things you do. But when it's ourselves, no, that kindness and compassion just disappears, doesn't exist. So my ask of you is to start using your kindness and compassion for yourself. Instead of going down that rabbit hole of, I made a mistake, it's the end of the world. It's like, okay, I made a mistake. That's fine. I can feel whatever I want to feel about that, disappointed, annoyed at myself. But that doesn't mean I'm going to sit there and ruminate on it. And the reason being, I call that like going down the rabbit hole, right? So when you're not aware of your inner critic, something small can happen and you go down the rabbit hole and you spend hours, days, weeks, months down there berating yourself. Self-awareness is about going, oh, it's just happened. How do I get myself back out of that rabbit hole an awful lot quicker? And maybe how do I not go down that rabbit hole quite as often? Some of the other ways you can do that is firstly change your expectations of yourself. So instead of having these expectations of this perfect person who's going to turn up every single day as the best version of themselves, set challenging. I'm all for challenging yourself and growing and getting outside the box, but attainable challenges. So part of the reason I say that is when we set ourselves goals, generally it's a Sunday evening, we're thinking about the week ahead, or it's the 1st of January, we're planning for the new year. We do it in what's called a very physiologically sort of neutral space. We're relaxed, we're chilling on the couch, and we set ourselves goals that we think are realistic in our current physical state. But that's not the reality of what's going to happen at 7 a.m. Monday morning when your alarm goes off, right? Or 10 a.m. when you're in the office and there's all these competing things. So be realistic with what your expectations are. The other thing I want you to do is find your inner champion. So if you've given all this sort of, mental energy to the inner critic, what could your inner champion be saying to you, right? Your inner champion is the version that goes, hey, maybe I didn't do that great, but I know I'm really good at, or I'm a great friend, or I'm great at listening, or I'm really good at. That voice should have as much, if not more, impact and opportunity to speak up in your brain as the inner critic does. And actually, over time, we want to amplify this massively. We want the inner champion to be the main voice. And the inner critic can be there, but that's okay, but not to the same level it is now. So if you've never had an inner champion, my recommendation is you go home and sometime in the next 48 hours, write down a list of what would your inner champion say to you? What would they say you do well? What would they say are your achievements? What attributes do you have that you really like about yourself? And whenever the inner critic shows up, bring your attention back to that list. Have it on your phone, have it on a notepad, whatever works for you. But at least pull yourself out of that inner critic mode by going back to this. And then embracing failure. Now, the reason I have this in inverted commas or air quotes is we perceive things as failure that are not failure. Failure to me is I'm done. There are 0 next steps. I have 0 options. I am out of this game. Versus, is this a challenge? Is it a detour? Is it an obstacle? So if I apply for a job and I don't get the job, often we go, I failed. You didn't fail. The right mentality or the right mindset we want to work on is, okay, I'm disappointed and it is okay to be disappointed. I really wanted that job. But a growth mindset would immediately switch to, What can I learn from that experience? What would I do differently next time? How could I answer that question that I didn't answer well? How could I answer that better? Could I do something different the next time around versus let me just beat myself up, tell myself I'm a terrible person, and chances are then I'm never going to apply for another job. It's easier, or that emotion or fear of failure, it's easier to just stay safe. It's easier to just stay small. It's easier to not take the risk. But if you change how you see failure, then it's not as big of a risk. Right now it's just hey, I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and I'm sure I'll learn something from it. So as you're starting through this, there are challenges, right? It is a big journey when you're trying to silence your inner critic. It does not happen overnight. So please don't give up on it. It's uncomfortable as you start, but the benefits you get, as you said earlier, not just in your career, but in life, is phenomenal. Because as you're bringing awareness over the next week, think about how much mental and emotional energy is being used on a daily basis when your inner critic is showing up. How could you use that mental and emotional energy in a much funner, positive, more energetic way? So the challenges you're going to face, first up, this is a habit. It is habitually built into your subconscious brain that when this happens, I do this. So I get a bit of constructive feedback, my inner critic shouts at me. It's the same as if I said to you, your alarm goes every morning. You're probably one of two people. You either hit snooze or you get straight up. Whichever it is, that's your habitual response, right? So it has to take awareness to go, oh, I want to change that response. I have to do something differently. It won't happen without intention. Next up is you always believe your thoughts are true. So we have thoughts. We never question them, right? We're like, well, my brain told me to think this thing, therefore it must be reality. Your brain lies to you constantly. And even if it's not lying, it's giving you a perspective that may not be accurate. It's influenced by all of that stuff that we said sat in your subconscious brain. So question it. And I'll share with you on the next slide if anybody wants to take a picture of just some questions you can ask yourself in the moment to try and get out of that mindset. Remember, they make you feel safe. So often that inner critic thinks it's protecting you from some potential negative experience. What it's actually doing is just keeping you small and keeping you in your space. So how can I feel safe but still take the risk? So years ago, I moved to New York, job that my gut said go for it. My brain was like, God, what if you, I've been to New York like twice. It's like, what if you hate living in New York? What if you're terrible at the job? What if, and that was all my inner critic, right? So I had to create a safety net. Had a conversation with my boss in London and went, so if I hate this, you'll take me back, right? Yeah? Will definitely be good for me to come back in 6 months or a year, which the answer was yes. Now, I did it in humor and in jest, but it actually, in my brain, it was 100% reality. I now felt safe to take that risk because the safety net was there. So what are the safety nets that you can put in place that make it comfortable to take the risk? New skills need practice. So again, back to our idea of confidence, we think you either have it or you don't have it. You're born with it or you're not. And I can tell you, so I was sharing with somebody outside, I have a 3-year-old niece. There is no inner critic. As far as she's concerned, she is God's gift to the human race, and everything she tells me to do and demands of me, I should just immediately do. The problem is, sometime between now and her probably getting into the big bad world, the world will tell her to doubt herself, to make herself smaller, to not be so loud, to not do this, to not do that. And our jobs, by the way, whether it's as parents or aunts and uncles or siblings or friends, is to counter that social conditioning. Because especially with young girls, by the way, often when they get into the workforce, we're like, why aren't you advocating for yourself more? And it's like, well, we've just spent 20 years telling these young girls to be quieter, to take up less space, to be whatever. So think of that for yourself, right? This is going to take practice, especially if you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, and these have been habits and thoughts you've had for your entire life. So these are the last little bits. So firstly is self-reflection. It sort of goes with self-awareness, but self-awareness can be in the moment or it can be later, right? Sometimes we look back a week later and go, oh my God, I can't believe I said that or I did that. Now I'm seeing something in there. But you need to create time for self-reflection. In the moment, after the moment, once a week, once a month, whatever it is, there needs to be time for you to actually think about things. And then the last two I will say is name it Mine is Hilda. So, whenever Hilda shows up and is not helping me, I will have a conversation, say, I hear you. That's, thank you. I know you're trying to protect me, but actually right now, either I don't need you or this is not helpful. Last thing I'm going to share is you need to create a pause, a pattern interruption. So as I said earlier, these are habits. So the way our brain is wired is A happens and I respond by B. I said the alarm clock, I jump out of bed, I hit snooze. I need to create a pause. So if I want a different response, I can't let that happen so automatically. I need to pause to go, hold up, let me choose my response. Am I choosing to hit snooze or am I choosing to get out of bed? Either way, it's an intentional action and a conscious choice versus just letting my habit flow. That is everything from me for today, but I'd love to take any questions. I'm sure we're probably